my girlfriend confessed. I cherish you, but I desire thrills before picking someone reliable like you. I must explore before committing. So I offered her complete freedom while establishing a reality she'd never join. What she did next caught everyone off guard, including herself. Maya and I had been together for 18 months, living in my Denver apartment for the past 6, and I genuinely thought we were building something that would last. I'm Alex, 31, working as a forensic accountant, the kind of job where you spend your days following paper trails and uncovering financial discrepancies, which maybe explains why I value honesty and straightforward communication so much. Maya was this brilliant 27-year-old graphic designer at a boutique marketing firm, someone who could turn a blank canvas into something that made you stop and stare, and I'd fallen completely for her creative energy and the way she made even mundane Tuesday nights feel special. We had our routines, weekend hikes through the Front Range, quiet dinners where we talk about everything from her latest design projects to my cases, lazy Sunday mornings reading different sections of the newspaper while sharing coffee I'd learned to make exactly the way she liked it. I thought those routines meant we were compatible, that we'd found our rhythm as a couple who actually enjoyed each other's company without needing constant external stimulation. That Tuesday evening in October changed everything when she came home from work with this carefully composed expression that immediately put me on edge. Alex, I need to tell you something important about us, about where I am emotionally right now, she said, sitting across from me at our kitchen table with the kind of deliberate positioning that meant this was a planned conversation, not a spontaneous moment of honesty. I closed my laptop and gave her my complete attention, the same way I'd been doing for 18 months whenever she needed to talk through a problem or share something meaningful. I cherish what we have together, I really do. You're exactly the kind of man I want to spend my life with, stable, dependable, someone who remembers that I take my coffee with oat milk and plans those perfect hiking trips where you've already checked the weather and packed extra snacks. The compliment felt poisoned somehow, like she was building up to something that would make those qualities sound like flaws. But I feel completely trapped by our predictability. Every Saturday we hit the same trails around Golden or Boulder. Every Sunday we cook some elaborate dinner and binge whatever series we're currently watching. I'm 27, and I feel like I'm already living the settled life of a 40-year-old suburban mom. I stayed quiet, recognizing that interrupting would only derail whatever speech she'd obviously rehearsed. I need to experience real excitement, real uncertainty before I can commit to forever with anyone. I want to feel the rush of meeting mysterious strangers at exclusive art gallery openings in Reno, the thrill of not knowing what someone's going to say or do next. I want to date people who might spontaneously decide we're flying to Aspen for the weekend, or who know about underground speakeasies I've never heard of. My chest felt like someone was slowly tightening a vice, but I kept my voice completely level. What exactly are you saying, Maya? I want to take a break from us, not permanently, but temporarily. I need to explore what else is out there before I can honestly say you're my choice and not just my safe, comfortable option. She reached across the table like she was trying to comfort me while simultaneously asking permission to shop around for my replacement. You're my forever person, Alex. You're exactly who I want to come home to after I've gotten this exploration out of my system. I just need to know for certain that choosing you is what I actually want, not just what feels familiar and secure. The word, choosing, made it sound like I was a car she was considering purchasing after test driving a few sportier models. So you see being with me as settling for security over excitement? That's not what I meant at all. I just need to validate that you truly are my best possible option by experiencing what else might be available out there. I stared at her for what felt like several minutes, processing the fact that the woman I'd been mentally picking out engagement rings for had just asked me to wait patiently while she determined if I was worth committing to. How long are we talking about for this exploration? Maybe 6 months? Long enough for me to really understand myself and what I need from a relationship. 6 months of being her backup plan while she test drove other men to see if they offered better features than my reliable model. 6 months of wondering if every day that passed was bringing her closer to finding someone who made me completely obsolete. And you expect me to just maintain our apartment and wait here while you figure out if I meet your standards? It's not about standards, Alex. You're wonderful exactly as you are. It's about me needing absolute certainty before I commit to something as serious as engagement and marriage and building a whole life together. What happened next apparently wasn't part of Maya's carefully rehearsed script, because the look on her face when I responded told me she'd expected tears, pleading, or desperate negotiation tactics to keep her from walking away. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and said something that clearly caught her completely off guard. "You're absolutely right. You should have complete freedom to explore whatever you need to explore." I watched her blink several times, like she was processing a response she hadn't anticipated. "You should also know that I'll be doing the same thing. If you need to test the waters to figure out what you want, then I need the same opportunity to understand what I actually deserve from a relationship." The next morning, I started making changes that had nothing to do with winning Maya back and everything to do with rediscovering who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone's safe option. I'd been thinking about joining this men's personal development group that met Thursday evenings at a community center in Boulder, something I'd researched months earlier but never pursued because Maya had subtly dismissed it as kind of weird whenever I mentioned it. The group was led by James, a divorced architect in his mid-40s who had this calm, straightforward way of talking about rebuilding your identity after major life changes. "Most of us end up here because we've been living someone else's version of who we should be," he said during my first meeting. "The real work is figuring out who you actually are when nobody else's opinion matters." That same week, I signed up for competitive chess training with a local master named Victor, something I'd loved in college but had gradually abandoned because Maya found it too nerdy for our social circle. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed the pure mental challenge, the way a good match could make 3 hours feel like 30 minutes, the satisfaction of seeing a strategy play out exactly as you'd planned it 15 moves earlier. Maya had been dismissive whenever I'd suggested we spend an evening at the chess club, claiming she didn't want to sit around watching me play boring games with antisocial people, so I'd stopped bringing it up. Now I was training twice a week and already planning to enter regional tournaments. I also enrolled in wilderness survival courses through the Colorado Mountain School, learning skills like fire building, orienteering, and emergency shelter construction in the actual Rocky Mountains. There was something deeply satisfying about mastering practical skills that could actually keep you alive, about building confidence that came from real competence rather than someone else's approval. Maya had always preferred our hikes to stay on well-marked trails with clear bathroom facilities and cell phone reception, but I'd been curious about more challenging wilderness experiences for years. Meanwhile, Maya dove headfirst into Denver's upscale social scene with the enthusiasm of someone finally free to pursue her authentic self. She started attending exclusive rooftop parties in Lodo, networking events at trendy galleries in the art district, and high-end social gatherings where people wore clothes that cost more than my monthly car payment. Within 2 weeks, she'd connected with Carter, a charismatic real estate developer who drove a white Tesla Model S and had this effortless way of talking about spontaneous weekend trips to Aspen like they were as casual as grabbing coffee. "Carter completely gets my need for excitement and spontaneity," Maya told me during one of our awkward check-in conversations. Last Saturday, he decided at 2 p.m. that we should drive to Vail for dinner, and we ended up staying at this incredible boutique hotel and having the most amazing weekend. I was heading out to my wilderness survival course when she shared this update, my backpack loaded with gear for learning how to purify water and navigate by stars. "That sounds really exciting for you," I said, and genuinely meant it. The difference was that I was no longer sitting around wondering if her excitement with other men meant I was inadequate. I was too busy discovering things about myself that I'd forgotten existed. 2 months into our exploration period, Maya's Instagram stories painted a picture of the glamorous life she'd been craving: expensive dinners at restaurants with unpronounceable names, private art gallery events where everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, and weekend getaways to mountain resorts that probably cost more than I made in a month. But when she called me after a particularly elaborate evening at some exclusive rooftop bar downtown, I could hear something strained underneath her enthusiasm. "How are things going with Carter?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than fishing for reassurance about my own prospects. "Oh, amazing. He's everything I thought I wanted: sophisticated, successful, always planning these incredible experiences." There was a pause that felt loaded. "It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm performing in someone else's life instead of actually living mine." I was on my way to chess training when she called, and I found myself only half focused on her relationship updates because I was mentally reviewing an opening strategy Victor had taught me the previous week. "What do you mean by performing?" Carter's social circle is all about image and status. Everyone's constantly competing to have the most impressive story, The most exclusive experience, the most expensive everything. Last weekend in Aspen, I spent more energy worrying about whether my outfit was appropriate for the crowd than actually enjoying the scenery. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. I thought I wanted spontaneity, but Carter's version of spontaneous means dropping $3,000 on a weekend without discussing it first. It's exciting, but it's also kind of exhausting trying to keep up. Meanwhile, my own life had taken on a rhythm that felt genuinely satisfying for the first time in years. My chess skills had improved dramatically. I'd placed third in a regional tournament the previous weekend, something that gave me a quiet sense of accomplishment Maya would have dismissed as nerdy but that felt deeply meaningful to me. The wilderness survival courses had progressed to the point where I was now certified as a weekend guide, leading small groups through backcountry navigation exercises and emergency preparedness training in the mountains around Estes Park. There was something incredibly grounding about teaching people practical skills that could actually save their lives, about building confidence through real competence rather than external validation. James's personal development group had become a cornerstone of my week, a place where I could talk honestly about rebuilding my sense of self-worth without someone else's opinion defining my value. The interesting thing about Maya's exploration, I told the group one Thursday evening, is that I'm starting to realize I was settling for someone who saw my stability as boring rather than valuable, my interests as obstacles to overcome rather than parts of who I am. You were both settling, James observed. She was settling for security while craving excitement, and you were settling for someone who didn't actually appreciate what you brought to the relationship. Maya's texts became more frequent as her glamorous new life started showing cracks. I miss our Sunday morning coffee ritual, she wrote after a weekend where Carter had apparently dragged her to 3 different networking events. These people don't actually talk to each other, they just exchange business cards and Instagram handles. Another time, remember how we used to plan those perfect hiking trips where you'd research the best trails and pack all the right snacks? Carter's idea of outdoor time is sitting by the pool at expensive hotels. I found these messages oddly touching but not particularly relevant to my current situation. I was training for a competitive chess tournament, planning a solo backpacking trip through Rocky Mountain National Park, and discovering that I genuinely enjoyed my own company in ways I'd forgotten were possible. The version of myself that Maya had left behind, the one who sought her approval for every decision and measured his worth by her satisfaction, was being replaced by someone who had his own goals, interests, and sense of purpose that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. When Maya suggested we meet for coffee, just to catch up as friends, I agreed but suggested we meet at a different place than our old regular spot, a chess-themed cafe near my training location that I discovered and genuinely loved. She arrived looking slightly frazzled, designer clothes perfectly coordinated but something tired around her eyes that expensive makeup couldn't quite conceal. "You look really good," she said, studying my face like she was trying to identify what had changed. "Different somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "More like myself, I guess." What started as occasional friendly check-ins from Maya gradually escalated into something that felt more like reconnaissance missions disguised as casual conversation. Her texts went from weekly updates about her exciting new social life to almost daily messages about shared memories, inside jokes from our relationship, and increasingly transparent attempts to gauge my availability for reconciliation. "Do you remember that amazing weekend we spent in Steamboat Springs last winter?" She'd text at random times. "I was looking through photos and we looked so happy together." Or, "I drove past our old hiking spot near Golden today and it made me think about how perfectly we used to plan those trips together." The shift was obvious but also irrelevant because my life had developed a momentum that didn't revolve around her schedule or emotional needs. When she'd call wanting to have long conversations about our relationship, I was often heading out to lead wilderness survival workshops, competing in chess tournaments that took me to cities across Colorado and Wyoming, or working late on freelance financial consulting projects I'd started taking on to fund my new interests and adventures. "You're always so busy now," she complained during one phone call that I'd answered while driving to a chess competition in Fort Collins. "I feel like I can barely get 10 minutes of your actual attention." "I am pretty busy," I agreed. "But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm doing stuff I actually enjoy for the first time in years." "But what about us? What about staying connected during this break?" The question struck me as fundamentally backwards. She'd asked for space to explore other options, and now seemed frustrated that I wasn't remaining readily available as her emotional support system while she figured out whether she wanted to keep me or trade up. Maya, you asked for freedom to see what else was out there. I'm giving you exactly what you requested, and I'm using the same freedom to figure out what I actually want from life. There was a long pause before she said, I didn't expect you to become so independent. Independent? Like my developing interests and confidence outside of our relationship was somehow a betrayal of our agreement rather than the natural result of no longer centering my entire identity around being her safe option. The most telling conversation happened when she suggested we meet for coffee at our old regular spot, the bookstore cafe where we used to spend Sunday afternoons reading different books while sharing a table and occasionally commenting on interesting passages we'd found. I'm actually pretty booked this week, I told her, which was true. I had chess training Tuesday and Thursday, a wilderness survival course Saturday, James's group Thursday evening, and a freelance consulting project that needed attention over the weekend. Next week's looking tight too with the regional chess tournament. Chess tournament? Since when do you care about competitive chess? The dismissive tone was exactly the same one she'd used throughout our relationship whenever I'd mentioned interests she didn't find socially acceptable or exciting enough for her image. Since I started taking it seriously about 3 months ago, I'm actually getting pretty good at it. But that's so. She stopped herself before finishing the sentence, probably realizing that calling my interests boring might not be the best strategy for someone hoping to eventually reconcile. It's just not very social, is it? The chess community is incredibly social, actually. I've made more genuine friends in the past few months than I had in years of trying to fit into social situations that weren't really my style. When we finally did meet for coffee 2 weeks later, Maya seemed genuinely shocked by how much my life had changed during our break. I mentioned the financial consulting work I'd been doing for small businesses, helping them identify inefficiencies and potential fraud, work that felt meaningful and utilized my skills in ways my regular job didn't always allow. I talked about the Wilderness Survival Certification Program and how satisfying it was to teach people potentially life-saving skills. I showed her photos from the chess tournament where I'd placed second in my division, surrounded by people who appreciated strategic thinking and mental challenges. You seem like a completely different person, she said, and I could hear something almost like loss in her voice. Not different, I corrected. Just more myself than I was when I was constantly trying to be the version of me that you found acceptable. The conversation revealed something I hadn't expected. Maya was struggling with the reality that her safe option had developed into someone with an independent, fulfilling life that didn't include waiting around for her to finish exploring her alternatives. 6 months after Maya's original confession, I came home from a weekend wilderness instructor certification course in the mountains near Aspen to find her sitting outside my apartment door with what looked like a carefully planned reconciliation presentation. She'd brought takeout from our old favorite Thai restaurant, a bottle of wine we used to share on special occasions, and a photo album she'd apparently compiled of our best memories together, hiking trips, quiet dinners, lazy Sunday mornings that she'd once found suffocatingly predictable. I know this might seem presumptuous, she said as I approached with my backpack full of camping gear and certification materials, but I really need to talk to you about us, about what I've learned during these past 6 months. I unlocked my door and gestured for her to come in, but I could see her taking inventory of how much my apartment had changed during our separation. The generic furniture we'd chosen together had been replaced with pieces that reflected my actual interests, a sophisticated chess set as the centerpiece of my living room, artwork from local artists I'd met through chess tournaments and wilderness training, bookshelves filled with strategy guides and survival manuals instead of the design magazines Maya used to leave scattered around. Your place looks completely different, she said, setting down her carefully arranged reconciliation props. More like you, I guess. I was putting my gear away when I heard a key turning in the lock, followed by Sarah's voice calling out, "How did the certification course go? Did you end up having to build that emergency shelter in the snow?" Sarah Chun was someone I'd met through the Wilderness Survival Program 3 months earlier, an emergency room nurse who shared my love of outdoor adventures and had this practical, down-to-earth approach to life that I found incredibly refreshing. She was brilliant, funny, and had never once made me feel like my interests were obstacles to overcome or aspects of my personality that needed fixing. We'd been dating seriously for 2 months, something I probably should have mentioned to Maya during our recent coffee conversation, but our relationship status hadn't seemed relevant to her complaints about my busy schedule. "Sarah," I called back, "we have company. Maya's here." Sarah appeared in the doorway carrying grocery bags, clearly planning to cook dinner together as we discussed before I left for the weekend. She took in the scene, Maya surrounded by takeout containers and photo albums, the obvious romantic setup, the tension in the room, and handled it with exactly the kind of calm competence I'd come to appreciate about her. "Hi Maya," she said warmly but without any awkwardness. "I'm Sarah. Alex has mentioned you." Maya's face went through several expressions very quickly: surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like panic as she processed the fact that I hadn't been waiting around in relationship limbo while she explored her options. "Sarah's my girlfriend," I said simply, because there didn't seem to be any point in making the situation more complicated than it needed to be. "Girlfriend?" Maya's voice cracked slightly. "Since when?" "About 2 months now." I could see Maya mentally calculating timelines, probably wondering if Sarah was the reason I'd been so unavailable for her increasing requests to reconnect and analyze our relationship status. "We met through the Wilderness Survival Program." "I should probably give you two some privacy," Sarah said tactfully, but I shook my head. "Actually, I think it's better if you stay." Maya came to talk about reconciling, and I'd rather be completely transparent about where things stand. Maya launched into what was obviously a prepared speech about how the past 6 months had taught her that she'd been taking our relationship for granted, that she now understood the difference between excitement and genuine compatibility, that she was ready to commit fully to building the future we'd once talked about together. "I know I hurt you by asking for space," she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "But I had to learn the hard way that what we had together was exactly what I actually wanted. All those spontaneous adventures and mysterious strangers. It's not real life, Alex. Real life is finding someone who knows how you like your coffee and plans ahead so you never have to worry about anything important." The irony wasn't lost on me that she was now describing as valuable all the qualities she'd once found suffocatingly predictable. I listened patiently to Maya's entire reconciliation speech, letting her explain how Carter had turned out to be emotionally unavailable despite his impressive lifestyle, how the glamorous social scene she'd craved was ultimately shallow and exhausting, how she now understood that genuine partnership mattered more than constant excitement. When she finished, I sat quietly for a moment, choosing my words carefully because I genuinely didn't want to be cruel, just honest. "Maya, I appreciate you being so direct about what you've learned, and I'm glad you figured out what you actually value in a relationship. But there's something important you need to understand about our break." I glanced at Sarah, who was listening respectfully but without any apparent anxiety about the conversation's direction. "You asked for time to explore your options because you wanted to make sure I was actually your best choice rather than just your safe option. That process taught me something equally valuable. I learned the difference between being someone's choice and being someone's backup plan." Maya's expression shifted as she began to understand where this was heading. "What I realized during these 6 months is that I don't want to be with someone who had to date other people to figure out if I was worth choosing. I want to be with someone who chose me from the beginning because they recognized what I brought to the relationship." I looked at Sarah, who smiled back with the kind of warmth that came from genuine affection rather than resigned acceptance. Sarah didn't need to explore other options to determine if I was good enough. She saw who I was and decided that was exactly who she wanted to be with. "But Alex," Maya's voice was getting desperate now, "I do choose you. That's what I'm here to tell you. I've learned my lesson, and I know for certain now that you're exactly what I want. The problem is that your certainty came from elimination rather than recognition. You're not here because you discovered something wonderful about me, you're here because the alternatives didn't work out." Maya started crying in earnest then, the kind of tears that came from realizing a mistake couldn't be undone. "That's not fair. People make mistakes. People need time to figure things out sometimes." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "And you took the time you needed. But I took the same time to figure out what I needed, and what I learned is that I deserve someone who doesn't need to shop around to appreciate me." Sarah had been quietly observing from the kitchen, but now she joined the conversation with a kind of diplomatic directness that came from her medical training. "Maya, I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, but from what Alex has told me about your relationship, it sounds like you both want very different things from life. You're looking for someone who can provide excitement and spontaneity, And Alex is someone who finds joy in planning and building stable foundations. She paused, clearly trying to be fair to everyone involved. There's nothing wrong with either approach, but they're not particularly compatible long-term. But I don't want excitement anymore, Maya protested. I want exactly what Alex offers: stability, thoughtfulness, someone who plans ahead and takes care of details. The issue, Sarah continued gently, is that you discovered you wanted those things by trying everything else first. Alex found someone who valued those qualities from day one, without needing to test other options. Maya turned back to me with increasing desperation. Please don't let 6 months of mistakes ruin 3 years of something real. I know I hurt you, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove I've changed, to show you that I understand now what we had together. Maya, I said as kindly as I could, what we had together was me constantly trying to be enough for someone who saw me as a consolation prize. What I have with Sarah is someone who sees me as exactly what she wants, not what she's settling for after exhausting more exciting possibilities. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Maya cycling through various arguments about our history, our compatibility, her willingness to commit completely, and how unfair it was that I wouldn't give her a second chance to prove she'd learned from her mistakes. But the fundamental issue remained unchanged. She was asking me to take her back because she determined I was her best available option, while I'd found someone who chose me because I was exactly what she wanted from the beginning. When Maya finally left, taking her photo albums and cold Thai food with her, Sarah and I sat quietly for a while processing what had just happened. That was harder than I expected, Sarah said eventually. Not because I was worried about you choosing her, but because I could see how much pain she was in. She's learning what I learned 6 months ago, I replied. That treating someone like a backup plan has consequences, even when you eventually decide they were your first choice all along. Maya's final attempt to change my mind came through my sister Emma, who called me 2 weeks after the reconciliation disaster with obvious reluctance in her voice. I need to tell you that Maya reached out to me yesterday, Emma said without preamble. She wanted me to talk to you about giving her another chance. Emma and I had always been close. She was 3 years younger but had this practical wisdom that made her one of the few people whose relationship advice I actually trusted. She'd met Maya several times during family gatherings and had been diplomatically supportive without ever expressing strong enthusiasm about our relationship. What did she say exactly? I asked, genuinely curious about Maya's strategy for enlisting family pressure. She talked for about 20 minutes about how she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, how she realizes now that you're exactly the kind of man she wants to marry, how she's learned to appreciate stability and thoughtfulness instead of taking those qualities for granted. Emma paused. She also mentioned that she thinks Sarah is just a rebound relationship and that your history together should count for more than a few months with someone new. I found myself laughing, not from cruelty but from genuine amusement at Maya's fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. What did you tell her? I told her that I've never seen you as confident and genuinely happy as you've been since you started dating Sarah. That Sarah encourages your interests instead of treating them like obstacles to overcome. That you seem like yourself again in a way you hadn't for the last year or so of your relationship with Maya. Emma had always been perceptive about these things. I also told her that begging family members to pressure someone into taking you back isn't exactly the foundation of a healthy relationship. How did she respond to that? She got pretty emotional, started talking about how 3 years together should mean something, how everyone deserves a second chance, how she'd do anything to prove she's changed. Emma's tone suggested she hadn't been particularly moved by this appeal. Then she asked me if I thought you were making a mistake by choosing someone you barely know over someone who knows you completely. That question revealed everything about how Maya was still thinking about our relationship, as if intimacy and history automatically trumped compatibility and mutual respect. The thing is, Alex, Maya might know your coffee preferences and your work schedule, but Sarah knows who you actually are when you're being yourself instead of trying to be what someone else wants. 3 months later, Sarah and I ran into Maya at the Saturday Farmers Market in downtown Denver, something that probably should have been awkward but felt more like a chance encounter with a distant acquaintance. Sarah and I had been together for 5 months by then, and we developed the kind of easy compatibility that comes from two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company without needing to perform or compete for attention. We were shopping for ingredients for a dinner we'd planned to cook together before I left for a chess tournament in Wyoming the next morning, the kind of simple domestic routine that I'd once thought was boring but now recognized as the foundation of actual partnership. Maya looked smaller than I remembered, more uncertain, like someone who was still figuring out how to navigate the world without a backup plan waiting in the wings. She was alone, examining organic vegetables with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was trying to look busy rather than actually shopping with purpose. "Alex," she said when she noticed us, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sarah. How nice to see you both." "Hi, Maya," Sarah replied warmly, completely without the awkwardness I might have expected. "How are you doing?" "Good, really good. I'm actually dating someone new, Marcus. He's a photographer. We met at an art gallery opening." She was trying too hard to sound casual, like she needed us to know she'd moved on successfully. "That's great," I said and meant it. "I hope you're happy." There was a moment of silence before Maya said, "I saw on Instagram that you placed first in that chess tournament last month. Congratulations." "Thanks." It was pretty exciting. I could see her processing the fact that my interests had developed into genuine accomplishments rather than just hobbies she'd found socially embarrassing. "Sarah's been learning to play too. She's getting pretty good at it." Sarah laughed. "I'm terrible, but I love watching Alex compete. The strategic thinking is fascinating." Maya watched this exchange with something that looked like recognition, maybe understanding for the first time what it looked like when someone appreciated your partner's interests instead of tolerating them. "Well, I should let you get back to your shopping," she said finally. "Take care of yourselves." As we walked away, I realized that seeing Maya again had confirmed something important. I felt genuinely peaceful about how everything had worked out. Not vindicated or superior, just grateful that her need to explore had forced me to discover who I actually was when I wasn't trying to be someone else's version of acceptable. "She seems sad," Sarah observed as we picked out tomatoes for our dinner. "Do you feel bad about how things ended?" "I feel bad that she's struggling," I said honestly. "But I don't regret choosing someone who chose me first."